Vanessa Harper was 32 years old, and by the time her mother called her selfish, she already knew exactly how much her silence had cost her. $6,000, not counting late fees, emergency payments, or the sleepless nights she spent checking whether her parents' house still had electricity. She sat quietly at the dining table in her parents' home in Greenfield while relatives laughed and passed plates around. Her mother, Eleanor, smiled as though she had made a harmless joke. "You could help more if you weren't so selfish," she said loudly. The room instantly became quiet. Forks stopped moving. Vanessa's younger brother, Daniel, gave a small laugh under his breath while their father stared down at his food. Vanessa looked up at the glowing lights above the table, the same lights she had paid to keep on for almost a year. She slowly lifted her glass and calmly replied, "You'll notice my selfishness when the lights go out." Vanessa had not planned to answer that way. She had driven 3 hours from Cleveland carrying a handmade ceramic bowl she spent an entire weekend creating during a pottery class. She chose a soft blue color because Eleanor always said blue made a home feel peaceful. But the gift was still unopened on the kitchen counter beside a pile of pies. When Vanessa arrived, her mother barely looked at it. Instead, Eleanor pulled her aside and whispered, "Did you remember the utility account password?" Your father said another warning notice came. That was the welcome Vanessa received after weeks of working overtime. No one asked about her drive, her health, or her recent promotion interview. Her role in the family had slowly changed over the years. She was no longer treated like a daughter. She had become a walking emergency account, someone everyone expected to rescue them whenever bills became too difficult. The problems had started the previous winter during a late-night phone call. Vanessa remembered the exact time because she had been reviewing reports for a commercial energy project when her phone rang. Eleanor's voice sounded worried and small. "The electric company sent a shut-off notice," she admitted quietly. "We just need a little help until your father's pension comes through." Vanessa asked how much they needed. Eleanor hesitated before saying $480. Vanessa transferred the money within minutes. She did not ask why the bill had become so high or why Daniel had not contributed even though he lived nearby. She told herself helping family was the right thing to do. The following month it was the gas bill, then the water bill, then the internet bill because Eleanor claimed her church meetings and doctor appointments required online access. Every month brought another emergency that somehow became Vanessa's responsibility. By spring, Vanessa had created a spreadsheet to track every payment. Numbers felt easier to manage than emotions. Electric bills, gas bills, water bills, internet charges, reconnect fees, and late penalties slowly filled the document. Each time Eleanor promised the help was temporary. Each time Daniel had a different excuse. He needed money for his children's school activities. His truck needed repairs. His wife wanted to renovate their kitchen. Vanessa listened quietly while continuing to pay. What her family did not know was that she had started saving every text message, voicemail, and payment confirmation. She kept screenshots of Eleanor saying things like, "Don't tell your father how much I asked for," and messages that read, "Daniel is stressed right now, but you're better with money anyway." Vanessa did not collect the evidence because she wanted revenge. Somewhere deep inside, she simply knew that one day they would pretend none of it had happened. During the drive to dinner that evening, Vanessa almost convinced herself to stay silent again. Rain hit the windshield while Eleanor sent message after message asking whether Vanessa could quietly pay the electric bill before dessert because the account was acting strange again. Vanessa stared at the phone while sitting at a red light. Beside her sat the carefully wrapped blue bowl she had made with her own hands. She imagined arriving to a normal family dinner where no one asked for money. Maybe her father would ask about her career. Maybe her mother would open the gift with genuine excitement. Maybe Daniel would stop joking about her salary. But the moment she entered the house, Daniel smirked and said, "The rich city girl is finally here." Their father greeted her with a distracted nod while Eleanor immediately whispered, "Please don't mention the bills tonight. It makes us look irresponsible." Vanessa tried hard to keep the evening peaceful. She listened while Eleanor praised Daniel for fixing a loose kitchen cabinet earlier that week. She listened while Daniel complained about property taxes and how difficult life was for parents. Then he glanced at Vanessa and added, "Some people have it easy when they only have themselves to worry about." Vanessa tightened her grip on her fork. She thought about her rent, student loans, insurance payments, and the extra consulting work she had taken just to keep her parents' utilities running. Before she could speak, Eleanor smiled sweetly and said, "Vanessa has done well for herself, but she could still do more if she weren't so selfish." The sentence landed heavily across the room. Vanessa finally looked up and answered calmly, "You'll notice my selfishness when the lights go out." The silence afterward felt sharp enough to cut through every fake smile at the table. Daniel leaned back in his chair and laughed loudly. "Wow," he said. "Now you're threatening Mom and Dad?" Vanessa slowly placed her phone on the table. "No," she replied. "I'm done letting all of you call my help love when you receive it and selfishness when I stop." Eleanor's face tightened immediately. "This isn't the place for this conversation," she whispered nervously. Vanessa looked around at the relatives seated around the table. "Actually, this is exactly the place," she said. "The insult was public, so the truth can be public too." Their father finally looked up from his plate. "Vanessa," he warned quietly, but there was no confidence in his voice. Vanessa unlocked her phone and opened the first screenshot. She held it up and read aloud. "Can you pay the electric bill before noon? Don't ask Daniel. He's stressed." The room became painfully still as relatives exchanged uncomfortable looks. "Stop," Eleanor whispered quickly, but Vanessa continued. She opened another message and read it aloud. "Gas company again. Please handle it before your father finds out." Then another. "Internet is due. Daniel says you make enough anyway." Daniel's smile slowly disappeared. "You're seriously doing this?" he snapped. Vanessa met his eyes without fear. "Yes," she answered. Then she played a voicemail recording. Eleanor's voice filled the dining room speakers. "Honey, Daniel has children. You only have yourself. We don't know what else to do." The silence afterward felt different from before. It was no longer awkward. It was exposed. Vanessa looked around the room and quietly added, 12 months. Over $6,000. I have every receipt." Their father stared at her in disbelief. "Your mother said you only helped with a few small things," he admitted softly. Vanessa looked at him carefully and answered, "Your house stayed warm because I paid for it." Eleanor suddenly pushed back her chair. "You're humiliating me at my own table," she cried angrily. Vanessa felt emotion rising in her throat, but she kept her voice calm. "No, Mom. I protected you privately for a year. You humiliated me publicly tonight." Daniel stood up quickly and pointed at her. "Nobody forced you to pay those bills," he argued. Vanessa nodded slowly. "You're right," she answered. "Nobody forced me. You trained me." The words hit the room harder than shouting ever could. Her Aunt Margaret finally spoke up from across the table. "Vanessa, maybe we should all calm down. Don't make this bigger than it needs to be." Vanessa turned toward her aunt. "People saying that is exactly why it became this big," she replied. "Everyone benefited from the quiet version of me. No one complained until I finally started speaking." Eleanor's hands shook as she folded and unfolded her napkin nervously beside her untouched dinner plate. Then Eleanor changed tactics completely. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "After everything I sacrificed for you, this is how you repay me?" Vanessa stared at her mother carefully. Growing up, Eleanor had taught her to apologize quickly, help everyone, and never allow family members to struggle. But somehow those lessons had only applied to Vanessa. "Did you sacrifice for me?" Vanessa asked softly, "or for the image of a perfect family?" Eleanor looked stunned by the question. The dinner no longer felt like a family gathering. It felt like a courtroom where years of hidden resentment were finally being examined in public. Eleanor defended herself quickly. "I'm the one who holds this family together," she argued. "I organize everything. I remember birthdays. I host every dinner. Vanessa almost laughed. And who did you call when the lights were about to be shut off? She asked quietly. Eleanor opened her mouth to answer but could not find the words. Daniel quickly stepped forward to defend their mother. You make good money, he said sharply. Why are you acting like $6,000 ruined your life? Vanessa unlocked another folder on her phone. Because it wasn't just about the money, she replied. It was every holiday where Mom asked me to buy groceries before I could visit. It was Dad's medication becoming my responsibility while you bought a new grill. It was your wife messaging me for money while pretending you were handling things. Daniel's wife, Melissa, stared down at her plate uncomfortably. We all have problems, she muttered. Vanessa looked at her calmly. Then solve yours without assigning them to me. The room reacted with shocked silence. Daniel pointed angrily. Don't speak to my wife like that. Vanessa crossed her arms. Then don't let your wife text me asking for money while you pretend to be too proud to ask yourself. Their father looked smaller with every sentence spoken. For the first time that evening, their father spoke honestly. I didn't know it was that much, he admitted quietly while rubbing his forehead. Eleanor immediately turned toward him. Don't start blaming me now, she snapped. Vanessa watched both of them carefully and suddenly understood something important. Eleanor was not only afraid of financial problems. She was terrified of losing control over the family's image. For years she had described Vanessa to relatives as successful but distant, generous but difficult, caring but cold. Those descriptions slowly shaped how everyone viewed her. Vanessa lifted her glass just to stop her hands from shaking. Here's what happens now, she announced clearly. I'm removing my card from every account tonight. No more automatic payments. No more emergency rescues. If you need help in the future, make a real budget, ask respectfully, and accept that I may say no. Eleanor looked horrified. You would let your parents sit in darkness? She asked. Vanessa answered immediately. No. You placed yourselves there by ignoring the problem until someone rescued you. Daniel laughed bitterly. Good luck explaining that to people, he muttered. Vanessa looked around the table at every relative listening closely. I just did, she replied. At that moment, phones around the room began buzzing with messages from the family group chat. Someone had already asked whether the story was true. Another relative wrote, Eleanor always said Vanessa never helped. Eleanor grabbed her phone with trembling hands while reading the growing conversation. Years of carefully protected appearances were collapsing in real time. Delete those messages, she hissed. Vanessa calmly shook her head. No, Daniel grabbed his coat angrily and announced that he was leaving. But Eleanor immediately stopped him. You are not abandoning me right now, she snapped. For once, there was no Vanessa quietly stepping in to rescue the situation or smooth over everyone's embarrassment. Then Vanessa's phone vibrated with a new email notification. She almost ignored it, assuming it was another family message, but the sender's name caught her attention immediately. It was from the regional director at her company. Vanessa opened the email beneath the table and stared at the words carefully. She had officially been offered the regional director position in Chicago. The promotion came with a major salary increase, a relocation package, and leadership responsibilities she had dreamed about for years. Her chest tightened with emotion as she reread the offer. Eleanor was still talking about gratitude and family responsibility, but Vanessa barely heard her anymore. Finally she stood up from the table. Everyone looked toward her in confusion. I just got promoted, she announced quietly. The room went silent again. Her father blinked in surprise. What? He asked. Vanessa held up the phone. Regional Director. Chicago office. I start in 6 weeks. For the first time all evening, nobody had a prepared response. Eleanor's expression shifted rapidly from surprise to panic. Chicago, she repeated slowly. That's farther away. Vanessa nodded. Yes, it is. Daniel crossed his arms defensively. So this is what this is really about, he scoffed. You think you're too important for us now? Vanessa looked directly at him. No. This is about realizing I almost turned down my dream job because I thought staying available for everyone made me a good daughter. Eleanor took a cautious step closer. Don't make a major decision while you're emotional, she pleaded softly. That sentence nearly broke Vanessa's patience. For years, Eleanor created emergencies over ordinary bills, yet somehow Vanessa's career opportunity was the reckless decision. I made this choice before dinner, Vanessa replied calmly. I just didn't fully admit it to myself until tonight. Their father finally stood up slowly and whispered, "We are proud of you." Vanessa studied her father's face carefully. The words sounded correct, but they arrived far too late. Are you proud, she asked quietly, or just afraid I'll become harder to reach? Her father looked away without answering. That silence told her everything she needed to know. Eleanor suddenly asked the question Vanessa already expected. What are we supposed to do about the bills? She whispered nervously. Vanessa laughed softly, though there was sadness in it. There it is, she replied. Eleanor quickly shook her head. I didn't mean it like that. Vanessa placed her phone inside her purse. You did. You just usually hide it better. Around the room, relatives quietly began collecting coats and purses. No one wanted to remain trapped inside the uncomfortable truth any longer. The carefully staged family dinner was collapsing into unfinished food, crying children, whispered conversations, and growing embarrassment. Vanessa walked toward the kitchen counter and picked up the unopened blue bowl she had brought with love. Eleanor noticed immediately. You're taking my gift, she asked in disbelief. Vanessa looked at the bowl in her hands before answering. It was never really yours. You never even opened it. Eleanor flinched painfully at the words. Vanessa expected revenge to feel satisfying, dramatic, maybe even exciting. Instead it felt quiet and painful, like finally pulling a splinter from deep beneath the skin. By 9 o'clock that night, Vanessa sat inside her car in the driveway with the heater running while she removed her card from every utility account connected to her parents' house. Electric. Gas. Water. Internet. Each cancellation felt small on its own, but together they redrew boundaries her family had erased years ago. Through the front window she could see Eleanor pacing nervously while relatives avoided eye contact. Daniel struggled to calm his children while Melissa searched for missing jackets. For once, Vanessa stayed inside her own car and allowed everyone else to manage their own chaos. Her phone rang repeatedly. First Eleanor. Then her father. Then Daniel. Vanessa watched the missed calls stack up the same way unpaid bills once stacked up. Finally a text arrived from Eleanor saying, "Please come back inside. We need to talk like a family." Vanessa stared at the message for a long moment before replying, family should not mean unlimited access without respect. A few minutes later Eleanor walked outside without a coat, wrapping her arms tightly around herself against the cold night air. Vanessa lowered the car window halfway. Her mother's makeup had smudged beneath one eye, and for once she looked less like the woman who controlled every room and more like someone finally facing consequences. I'm sorry, Eleanor said quietly. Vanessa waited silently. Eleanor swallowed hard. Not because people found out. I hate that they know. But because you were right. I made you responsible for things that should never have been yours. Vanessa searched her mother's face carefully, wanting to believe her while refusing to confuse hope with proof. Why admit it now? She asked. Eleanor glanced back toward the glowing house before answering. Because when people started questioning me, I wanted to blame you again. Then Daniel asked whether you would still pay next month, and suddenly I heard how terrible it sounded. Vanessa felt tears burn behind her eyes. It sounded terrible because it was terrible, she answered. Eleanor nodded slowly. Yes. That small word carried more honesty than anything else her mother had said all evening. Their father stepped outside next and stood quietly beside Eleanor. I should have asked more questions, he admitted softly. Vanessa nodded once. Yes, you should have. He accepted the answer without arguing. Then Daniel appeared in the doorway holding one child while another cried behind him. "So what now?" he snapped bitterly. "We're all supposed to beg you?" Vanessa looked at him calmly. "No. You're supposed to handle your responsibilities like an adult." For the first time in years, Eleanor turned toward Daniel sharply. "Enough," she said firmly when he continued arguing. Daniel looked stunned by the sudden lack of protection from his mother. Vanessa noticed something important in that moment. Everyone at the house had lost something that evening. Eleanor lost control of the perfect family image she worked so hard to maintain. Daniel lost the comfort of always being excused from responsibility. Their father lost the ability to pretend ignorance made him innocent. And Vanessa lost the belief that being needed automatically meant being loved. She stepped out of the car and looked at her parents carefully. "I'm driving back to Cleveland tonight," she said. "And I'm accepting the Chicago position." Eleanor's face crumpled immediately. "Tonight?" she whispered. Vanessa nodded. "If you want to see me, you can call ahead, make plans respectfully, and understand that no is a complete sentence." Eleanor wiped tears from her cheeks. "Will you ever forgive me?" she asked quietly. Vanessa looked back at the brightly lit house she had spent a year financially protecting. "Maybe," she answered honestly, "but forgiveness won't come with automatic payments anymore." She hugged her mother gently before stepping back again. It was not the desperate hug of a daughter begging to be chosen. It was the careful embrace of a woman finally choosing herself. Their father handed her a folded pension statement and bank balance report. "Not because I'm asking you to fix things," he explained quickly, "but because I should have known where we stood." Vanessa handed the papers back. "You and Mom need to figure it out together first," she replied. On the drive home, snow drifted softly across the highway while her phone buzzed with messages from relatives apologizing for staying silent all these years. 3 weeks later, Vanessa officially accepted the Chicago position. 6 weeks later, she moved into a small apartment with tall windows overlooking rows of brick buildings and winter trees. On her first evening there, she placed the blue ceramic bowl in the center of her dining table and filled it with fresh oranges. A few days later Eleanor sent her a picture of the first utility bill she and her husband had managed to pay completely on their own. The message beneath the photo simply read, "We handled it." Vanessa smiled quietly. Not because everything had been repaired overnight, but because responsibility had finally returned to the people who created the problem. She eventually learned an important truth. Family should never require one person to sacrifice endlessly just to earn love. Healthy relationships respect boundaries before resentment grows. Saying no does not destroy real love. It only exposes relationships that were surviving on guilt instead of genuine care.